Hey everyone, hope you guys are doing well. I think we're finally live now. Hope you guys are doing well. So obviously this game week is just finished. This game week would be game week 28. Overall, we got 75 points. It's not reflected on this because there's some bonus from Solanke that hasn't been reflected, obviously, within my own team. So we actually got 75 points. Live rank will change as well. Live rank is 729 in the world, I believe. It's showing 671 right now, but that's not correct. But yeah, that was sort of my game week. We did think about, of course, the Saliba benching move and then Zabani for a hit. That didn't actually happen for me. I didn't actually go for that move in the end. Slight regret of it. Obviously, it's a 2 point gap, but I don't think that's a substantial, or significant sort of impact on my FPL outcomes. What's even more upsetting, of course, is we had Neto re-injured. Senesi seems to be out for a bit longer than expected. But I suppose the one positive is looking towards game week 30, at least Pau Torres is probably going to play. We'll see, of course, if Senesi can cover for us. But if I'm looking at my team for game week 30, particularly if I'm going to free hit on 29, that Poro move is still probably going to come into my team because we want to have a Spurs defender. They have one of the better fixtures there. The alternative, of course, is we go for, let's say, a Chelsea defender as well, because if, let's say, we get a better understanding of the double game week fixtures, then maybe we can prioritize different sort of defenders for game week 34 and make better decisions. Bilal, nice to see you around. Andre, well done on getting Zabarni. Good for you. What a game that was. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it just shows you this Luton team is very chaotic on both ends. And when I'm free hitting on 29, pretty tempted to go for some attackers that play versus Luton as well. Like, why not take that opportunity? Tom, hello. Got Zabarni for a -4. Was sure it was a loss. I mean, after the first half, I'm sure it felt pretty bad, but it seems like everyone's doing well too. So congratulations to you all. Not long started following you, Gary. Appreciate that, Gary. Danny says for free at 29, Wina Muniz or Fofana. Wisa Muniz. I kind of like Muniz, to be honest. I think he's a bit more nailed. Wisa has technically the best fixture. So I think if you're picking between Fofana as well, what you'll get is guaranteed minutes as well. I think they're all pretty close. I would probably go Muniz. But I know some people don't like the idea of going Muniz because it kind of counteracts, let's say, your Spurs defenders, and you might feel that you're sort of hedging in a certain way, and some people don't like hedging on a free hit, which I think is totally fine, logically speaking. Captain Semenyo Daft Sam, hey, that's incredible. Congratulations. I thought about Semenyo just generally as a pick, but it was very hard for my team to get there. As you can see, I was already sort of prepared to go triple Bournemouth. But having Senesi meant it was impossible to go Semenyo without major hits. Or I would have excluded Solanke somehow, and that would have probably seemed wrong. I mean, ultimately, we were one penalty away from Solanke doing extremely well for this week, and this being a really good week as well. Robert says Solanke was still disappointing. I mean, yeah, that's the thing too. But I think you also have to sort of look back and say Solanke had a lot of chances, which is exactly what we expected. So sort of the decision making was good. Obviously, him slipping and missing a penalty, not so good. And that happens in FPL. You can't get your outcomes right. But these were the fixtures to target a Solanke captaincy, and I'll stand by that. It was the best captaincy decision. Thake says, is top 1K doable whilst being at top 14K? Absolutely. Absolutely. Easily, I think it's doable. But you also have to get lucky as well. You're so upset that Zabarni scored out. Yeah, I mean, let's be honest. I don't own Zabarni. I would have preferred if he didn't score, but that happens, right, Dimitri? Shimley says, not having Palmer killed you. Silly Green Arrow, that's awesome. Well done on your rank as well. You're doing Solanke to Tony this week. I think that makes sense if you're just going for a regular, non-free hit path. What is my Salah plan? Game week 30-31. So as I said, I think my team looks really bad for game week 30. Like I might want to go. I probably have to play Gabriel versus Man City, and take the L there. But there's a world where I don't really want to play double Arsenal defense, to be honest. And I think I kind of have to go for Porro in game week 30 because he just has such a good fixture. On top of that, though, I feel like there's an opportunity as well to just go Salah with a hit on game week 31. It's not a bad opportunity, in my opinion, to sort of bin Watkins on that week. take Watkins out for a hit, potentially just go for a cheaper forward, and then just go for Salah through one of my midfield picks and call it a day there. That's sort of the plan roughly. 28k to top 1k still possible 100%. Honestly, like I think if I went and looked at my sort of rank rises, I don't know if I can easily check that now. Yeah, like you can see I went from 29k to effectively top 1k within 5 game weeks. And so it's very possible to get rank rises that are that crazy, in my opinion. So I feel like if you have a strong team, if you've got your chips left, or rather you're set up well for the path, if you've wildcarded recently, let's say you've used one of the wildcards that we've suggested, then you would be, more than capable of doing well going forwards this season. And even myself, for example, yeah, okay, fine, the wildcard didn't really work out so well, and that sucks, but it's not like the team that I wildcarded with was awful. I just had a lot of injuries, and that's sort of taken a lot of points away from my team theoretically. And I didn't have Foden, obviously. And sometimes, as you can see in a week like this, not having a Palmer, not having a Son, you can't have every player every week. So, yeah, I mean, it works out for some people. Obviously, some people have them all, but I didn't have Foden the last 2 weeks, and he was really the only player who was doing well. Whereas I had some other picks who arguably had okay fixtures, okay game weeks, but just didn't deliver, and that's fine. But you can still do it incredibly well, and swings are very violent in FPL, particularly this time of the season. Like, I don't know. I mean, even if you just look at my team this week, for example, Watkins, yes, he blanked. Haaland, yes, he blanked. But these are all players, as obviously capable of getting ridiculous swings, and continuing to own them isn't going to hurt as long as you have a strong team. Porro over Gusto. Potentially, yeah, because I think one thing to think about too with Gusto is when does Reece James come back, and whether someone like Gusto will lose his position if let's say Chelsea double in Game Week 35. Does Reece James come back and sort of muddy the minutes in terms of Gusto? I think Gusto is brilliant and I really like him, but does it make sense for me to go for Gusto? I'm not so sure. Salah, thank you so much for the super chat. You're free at 29 team. Flecken, Porro, Doughty, Rorslev, Son, Kulusevski, Paqueta, Hudson-Odoi, Watkins, Muniz, Fofana going a bit differential. Fair enough. I mean, if you don't back Tony, I think that's fine. Seems like you're backing a clean sheet, though, obviously, for the Brentford team. The only pick I don't love is Kulusevski. I think I would still prefer, like, let's say if we got a little bit of a leak, right? I mean, let's look at the fixtures. For Game Week 29, I mean, we might get a leak for Spurs, probably unlikely because it's a second game. But if you get a leak that Brennan Johnson starts, I think I'd prefer him over Kulusevski. I can understand going Kulusevski, though, and I just don't like the idea of losing Madison. But I really like Paqueta over Bowen as a differential. Hudson-Odoi is an interesting one, right? Because it comes down to, what tactical structure is Luton going to play, and what is, for example, Nuno anticipating as a result of that. Because he's mentioned, for example, in the previous match when they were playing versus Brighton, that they really wanted midfield control. Now, I think versus Luton, you probably don't care so much about this midfield control, so therefore Hudson-Odoi could very well start. And at that rate, I think it's still okay to go Hudson-Odoi. Fofana, Muniz, interesting. But once again, I think, I don't know. I mean, if you wanted to do a differential, I still think Wisa could be an interesting differential because everyone has their eye on Tony. But look, the picks are very close. You obviously know what you're missing out on. If you wanted even more differential, I think you probably want to go without Porro as well, maybe Udogi, just based on ownerships last week. But it's a very strong team, and Sun captaincy, I think we're all going there. So the rest of your team is going to stand out. Let's see. Non-free hitters have gone heavy on Luton this week, and Knicks are going for a few Nottingham Forest players on free hit. That's my idea as well. But I think just the reality too is that this Luton team is targetable. So why not, for example, go for Nottingham Forest attackers on a free hit? Look at how many chances they give. They're probably actually worse than Sheffield United on defense, which sounds crazy because we've been looking at Sheffield United all season as a team to target. I'll definitely activate the free hit. I mean, there might be some crazy situations regarding the royal family that I'm not going to mention, but I'll hold my free hit until the deadline and I'll pop it there. MJax, congrats on a good game week. Hope the same for you as well. Would you free hit this team or save until 34? You've got Areola, Porro, Doughty, Taylor, Son, Watkins. I mean, that's a strong team, to be honest. I think you're borderline, right? You've got 6 players. Taylor, arguable whether he's a player or not. I think I like the idea of taking a hit for Madison for sure. And then well, I mean, you go for Madison as a free transfer, and then you probably want to go for Tony as well. And maybe you're actually in a good spot there already. I don't really mind saving your free hit in that situation. So sad had Nuri and Mattis. Yeah, a lot of people had crazy bench points. I've seen people bench Palmer this week. Zabarnyi scoring is crazy lucky. For sure. But at the same time, the thing is, you get 2 chances of a player who also had really high clean sheet odds. So yes, of course, his routes towards points were very lucky. But he was a very sensible pick for this game week. So I don't really blame anyone for going to Barney. It was very sensible. We had him at the top of the cheat sheet for a reason as well, because we didn't believe that the Kirkes punt made sense. How often do you punt on differential players? I mean, for me, I don't really care. I don't really care about ownership at all. You know, I have Bruno Fernandes on my team. If I cared about ownership, I wouldn't have gone for him. But personally, I think if you picked good players with good logic, then of course go for differentials if they're possible. Because let's say you're trying to chase rank, it probably makes sense if you think, let's say Bruno on paper is going to get 10 points and Foden on paper is going to get 10 points. It does actually make sense to go for Bruno if you're at the point in the season where you're trying to chase, or even if you generally have that logic, like you want to get as crazy a rank rise as possible. It does make sense, in my opinion, to chase the slightly less owned pick. But if, let's say, you think Foden's going to score 15 points and Bruno's going to score 10, then of course that's going to massively change things around. Who would be a better pick for next game week, Bowen or Madison? I would still. Are you saying one game week only? I mean, I would have to probably say Bowen, just about. But the reality is, if you continue to own these players for beyond game week 29, like Madison's just that much better because game week 30 is a little bit better. Habla en español un poco, por favor. I mean, there you go. I think we just have more English viewers, so I'll stick to English, but appreciate you being around, Oscar. I love kebabs. Says, currently have 9 players for game week 29. Should I use both transfers for 11? I mean, the question is, what would your transfers be? You know, if the transfers are Spurs players, use the 2 of them. But if you actually don't have, let's say you already have 3 Spurs players, you might already have a Tony as well. I don't see the need to go towards 11 players. It might make more sense for your team to save transfers instead and to benefit from that. Joseph says, you may have seen my long question in the comment section of one of your early videos, but I wanted you to answer on stream. Yeah, feel free, Joseph, to let me know what the question is. I tend to respond to comments in my YouTube videos, you know, maybe 1 day later or 2 days later. So it might take a bit of time for me to respond, but I can have a look at it later. Hey, Anka, hope you're doing well. Is Poro that much better than Udogi if the price difference means I'd be priced out of a future transfer I want to make? And 2, is either Spurs defender worth a -4 this week? Personally, I think the Spurs defender is worth a -4. Not for this week specifically, but just the idea that if you look at our teams in Game Week 30, right, let's say I fast forward to Game Week 30 now, I'm staring at 2 Arsenal defenders, Doubt, who's a bad fixture. I mean, Pau, who is Pau, fine, good fixture. Senesi, who's probably still injured. I have a horrific team. So the idea that you're going for a Spurs defender for a -4, I think you're basically accepting the fact that you're taking a risk for Game Week 29, but actually it should really pay off as soon as Game Week 30. And I like transfers like that, you know. Why not take the chance to make that -4? So I do like that, Anka. And going back to Poro versus Udogi, I mean, first of all, I probably ask what the transfer is and what the alternative is if you have to go, let's say, Udogi instead, right? Like, let's say if you go for Poro, what's the transfer that you lose out and what would be the alternative? And I could probably better answer your question then. Generally, I think going for Udogi is perfectly fine. Particularly, as I said, if it gets you your best transfer and you think it's a better one than your alternative one. Ramiro says he doesn't have his free hit chip. Should I take a hit? I think 6 is borderline. I mean, look at my team now, right? I mean, who do I have? I've got, so next week, I mean, look, look at this. I've got 4 players, 5. I've got 5 players. I think 5 is too low, a little bit. And personally, because 5 is too low because I don't have, like, imagine if I owned Son and Madison and Watkins and Tony, and then I only own 4 of them. And that I would actually say, on the contrary, is better than what I have. Like, 3 defenders right now is probably worth 2 attackers in this game week because no one is getting clean sheets on paper. So let's just throw that out of the question, or the equation rather. So it really comes down to what players you have. If you have more of the attackers and you only have 6, I think don't free hit. you're in a good spot, right? Let's say if my team right now was Son, Madison, Watkins, Tony, and I had Porro, I would be laughing. I'd be laughing and I wouldn't free hit. But right now I've got players like Pau who I probably don't even want to have. He's going to play midweek. This Aston Villa defense doesn't look very great after the injuries and so on and so forth. It makes more sense for me to just free hit, get all the additional players in, because right now I'm down a lot of attackers. If you're up on attackers, I think, no need to free hit probably, but if you're down on attackers like me, a good chance. Yeah, Anka, I think, look, if you're talking about missing out on Salah, let's go you doggy for sure. And I think selling Estupiñán makes sense, because even if, let's say, he's back to being a first string player, right, Estupiñán, I don't think he's a first string player, first of all. He could very well lose his spot or be an early substitution. We've seen the two of that a couple times now over the last 8 game weeks. And on top of that, too, their fixtures are just poor. So, yeah, go for that Udoggy move, in my opinion, if it gives you Salah. Joey Kneecap says, just wanted to say, keep up the good work. Fran, your cheat sheet is really helpful and a great way to get oversight. Awesome. Super happy for you. And 86 game weeks is insane. Yeah, and congrats as well. You've eclipsed me as well in OR, so well done. Mihai says, I activated my free hit already. Please, Charles. I don't know, is it Charles or is it Kate? Owning KBA. Who's KBA? Are we saying KDB? Who's KBA? Am I losing my mind here? Should I transfer in Madison or Tony to field 8? I prefer Madison just because game 30 is going to be really good for Madison. How can I make it so you can answer my question? What was your question, Ramiro? I literally answered your question. But the thing is, I don't know what 6 players you have. I was thinking Solanke to Tony, but my second transfer is a question. I'm thinking Saliba out for who? You've got Udogie, Doughty, and Cash out. Honestly, I don't really like Saliba out in that situation, because how often is a player that you're going to bring in this week going to, overscore 4 points if they're not a Spurs player that you're also going to use on game week 30? I have almost your team and I bench Son instead of Saliba. You bench Son instead of Saliba. Ooh. I mean, that's tough. I still prefer to play attackers over defenders. And Son, and that's specifically because Son is Son. Like, he's a penalty taker and just an insane player. So even if, let's say, the fixture is tough, thanks, Harold. Appreciate you. You're the GOAT as well. Am I going to change Haaland anytime soon? Probably not, to be honest. We'll see what's going on. The Gordon injury. I mean, Gordon actually seems like he's back soon, Mihai. I think the latest news on Gordon apparently is that it's not a long-term injury. So I hope Gordon will be back for you soon. And don't sell Gordon if you plan on keeping him for game week 34, because it's very possible. I mean, let's just wait for Eddie Howe to speak, and we'll find out in game week 30, I imagine, how bad the Gordon injury is. Anton Lofgren says, of course it was a special game, but I'm trying to find differentials. 5 out of a 10 in a friendly league where only no one counts, so need to take risks. Yeah, no, I get you for sure. But I think another thing too is, like, I mean, if you think about it, like, you're never going to be 11 out of 11 with someone else, right? Sometimes just being 10 out of 11, and if your 11th player is just better, you're going to outscore. And you also have to think, how many games do we have left? We have like 10 more game weeks. So in those situations, unless you think it's a 50-50, right? Like, I personally I'm just saying that I don't think Saliba and Son were 50-50s, but there are situations where it does make sense to play a defender over, for example, let's say Foden, that fixture, because he's not on penalties as well. I don't mind benching Foden, but this is obviously, it sounds like hindsight, but it also comes down to things like that. Like, I find it a lot harder to bench a penalty taker, even though Son didn't even take a penalty, but he's also, centre forward as well, basically out of position player. So that makes things quite different. Reason for Kulu is I know Kulu's nailed, and you're right, Kulu is nailed, but his underlying stats also are quite poor. You have all your players that are playing Game Week 29 plus Bowen Morris. I think you keep your free hit, Gaston, for sure. As I said, like, you're up 2 attackers on me, which is huge. Keshav says, if I'm on a -4 already and made my transfers, but then activate, your free hit would cancel the -4. Keshav. So, I mean, it's your choice to free hit or not. FPL MK says he's got no free hit or wildcard. Plan is to get Salah in 31. Yeah, I think that's fine. Everyone's plan is either Salah 30 or 31. Dom to Tony now, then Son and Bowen to Salah, and Garnacho or Dom to Muniz, and then Bowen and Bort. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. Those are all good transfers in the future, particularly even Gusto. We'll see, of course, what the timeline is on James. Gordon could be fine. That's what I've heard. He's definitely not out for 9 months. I mean, well, look, we've had conflicting reports, that's for sure. Last night I heard 9 months. Today I've heard short-term injury. Um, I apologize on behalf of the Bruno slander. I mean, it's not about proving anyone wrong. I just think that he's got good underlying stats, so he's still a good player. If Bruno had no underlying stats, I would say he's a joke. And I'd probably rage transfer him out of my team. But the reality is his underlying stats are still very good. He's capable of doing points sometimes. And I got lucky this week, right, with a penalty. So Haaland out for Tony. If Haaland out for Tony allows you to go Salah in Gameweek 30, I think that's sensible. Wisa hat-trick incoming. That's pretty ambitious, but, good luck to you if you go Wisa. Wildcarding in 30, would you take a -4 to bring in Madison or Bowen? I would go Madison, personally. Do you think it's worth playing a differential captain like Tony to make up for the -8 hit compared to free hitters? I still think I would prefer a Son captaincy. Like, if you asked me how many times is Son going to outscore Tony, I'd say probably 55-45. But I understand your point in terms of the free risk of Tony captaincy. Like, everyone's probably going to captain Son, if we're being honest. So it could work out in terms of the risk. But you need to understand, of course, that's a huge risk that you're taking. And it might pay out. It might pay out because Tony's got a great fixture himself. And honestly, if I had to vice captain someone this week, it would be Tony on my free hit. If I make a transfer this week and free hit the same week, does the transfer go through? No, it doesn't go through. It gets cancelled. Elliker says he got rid of Haaland for Salah. Have realized you can't. I mean, you can. I think you can have 2 premiums in your team if you've got ridiculous transfer value. But the reality too is, like, there's so many good picks you can get by just owning 1 premium, right? Let's say you just own Salah. That allows you to go for players like Trent later down the line. It allows you to potentially go for like 8 attackers. It allows you to go for Isaac, Darwin, Foden. Like, if you want like let's say if I look at my own team now, like, I can put Salah in the team, but it's going to cost me a lot, right? Like, let's say I replace Fernandes for Salah. I still need to get rid of a lot of value within my team. So probably, like, I need to get rid of Watkins. And the thing is here, I can't even go Watkins to Isak, right? So that's an issue. I can't go Darwin either. So that's another issue. So maybe I have to also, like, reduce the amount of value I have. Maybe, let's say, in a Saliba potentially as well. So, but that also forces me to go for someone like Udogie, and that's tough. That's pretty tough. Like, if I wanted to squeeze in a structure like this, and I'm still owning Neto, who arguably doesn't have a good replacement except for Mr. Garnacho over here for Gameweek 34. Like, in reality, this is a strong Salah Haaland team, but there's still so many good FPL players that I'm missing out on, right? Like, Foden is not in this team right now. If I dropped Salah and I went Foden instead, I could have a really strong team. Like, players, like, it could be filled with players like Isak as well. And I can even go for, your Poros of the world and things like that. So it does come down to, what am I able to spend that money on? And Garnacho obviously can still be Fernandes at that point, and the team's not going to look too bad. That's still the same amount of transfers, but the team is very different, and we'll see what happens. One of the big things too is the swings in terms of captaincy. So, like, let's say if I remember, for example, when I wildcard on Gameweek 8, some people went Salah only. And if you look at, for example, Salah's hauls, like, after Gameweek 8, they were insane, right? Like, 3 out of 4 game weeks here, you're already seeing like 16, 15-point hauls. Even in some tougher fixtures like 9, everyone went for a Haaland captaincy here. Salah banged. Even, for example, the Crystal Palace game, this was one where people got Salah points anyways, because if you vice captained him, you were fine. But there's a lot of swings, right? And that happens in FPL. So a lot of it's going to be luck as well, whether you go 1 meum or 2 meum. And I think another thing too is I've got a lot of team value, so not everyone can build the same team as me, which is fine. Zabarni is the GOAT. Fair enough, Benji. Congrats to having Zabarni. How to stay motivated after going up 30K in 6 weeks and at 1.2 million. I think it's just about thinking, okay, let's say if you actually think you've got a strong team, you should be fine. Like, there will be weeks where you're going to get better luck, and your strong team is going to bear out better. But another thing too is, if you've got chips in your arsenal and you're playing a patient game, you're, let's say, waiting for free at 34, things like that, that's going to help a lot. So I think if you've got things in your back pocket, that's nice. If you think your team is stronger than the rest of the field, that's nice too. Do you think it's worth taking a -8 to bring in Tony, or take -4 for Wisa? I'd probably take a -4. I don't know about a -8 for Tony, personally. you might want to go Muniz, honestly. Instead of going for Wisa, I think Muniz might make sense. Anka says you'll have Holland, Salah, Son, Saka, and still 0 point in the bank and still lose FPL. And that's another thing too. Like the most expensive squad isn't the best squad, and a lot of it's luck, right? Is my free hit active? Not yet, but it will be soon. Gibbs White is becoming a lock in my free hit draft. Yep. I mean, Gibbs White is coming soon. Is Muniz starting? I think he will. Are you guys concerned about the Broya news in terms of the loan agreement and the 4 million? I just think that look, Muniz at the end of the day is such a key player for Fulham. You're not going to tank your season by starting Broya in a bunch of games. Muniz is definitely starting. Wildcard in 33, 35, free hit in 34. I don't really like wildcarding before your free hit because I think you can just dead end on 34 surely and then wildcard afterwards if you're planning to bench boost. I love Wood and I'm not too scared of Taiwo, but I might be wrong. Like I'm happy to be wrong, but I want to get some more ammunition versus Luton. Like why not? Isn't Jimenez back? Yeah, he is. He is back, I think. When are the 34 doublers to be announced? Game week 30. Chanrachur says, I've responded to your question. Alex says he's wildcarded this week, have 10 players for Game Week 29. Worth it to use. Alex, I mean, I'd probably say, let's say you don't go for the Tony free transfer. If you roll the free transfer, does it make more powerful moves for you? Like, let's say, if you already have Salah in your team, you probably actually could go for the upside of just going for Tony this week. Now, if you don't, for example, like, let's say you're saving up for the Salah move, then I'd say save up for the Salah move. So it comes down to what your wild card is sort of looking like and how many moves do you plan to make on 30, 31, that sort of thing. I'd probably answer that question going a little bit ahead of time. Muniz is the way forward for me as an enabler. Yeah, I mean, let's have a look. I mean, I'll be interested to see, obviously, if Jimenez takes some minutes away from him. I don't think Muniz is suddenly going to play every single minute until the rest of the season, right? He's very good, and he seems quite fit, actually, which I think is a huge thing because even with Jimenez, I think the only reason why he wasn't clocking 90 minutes consistently was because he's actually just incapable of playing 90 minutes at the intensity that Fulham need. So that's quite a big difference. Thanks for the Broya input. I mean, Broya is definitely not. He's not a punt at all. I think Muniz is interesting, and he's a good punt. So if I'm thinking like let's say you lock in Watkins and Tony on a free hit. I mean, let's just build a free hit now, to be honest. Like, what is my free hit going to look like? I mean, it's going to have Watkins. I think I'm going Tony, even though he's been depressing. I think I'll go for Wood. Chris Woody Wood. Go for Gibbs White, maybe. Maybe go for Pack. Madison. Transfer out Son. What a shocker. No, I'm kidding. Let's go Son here. Obviously, I haven't decided whether this is like a 3-5-2, 3-4-3. It also depends on, first of all, the West Ham games and the Aston Villa games in midweek. So obviously, games that are happening very, very soon. Doughty I keep. I'm probably going Porro. Let's be honest. Reguilon seems like he's in training, so I'll take Reguilon. Flecken and Sells probably my two players. This is sort of the draft. And then, I mean, like what? I don't know. I can have Rorslev. No, sorry, of course, no, I can't. What would I go for here? Maybe Assignon and maybe Nico Williams. Am I spelling him wrong? Oh, no, I guess they just don't even have his name. Too many players for Nottingham Forest. Oh, right, of course, because I got Sells. Maybe I just replace Sells with, could be Kaminsky, could be Leno. If we think that Nottingham Forest will rack up a lot of shots, why not go Kaminsky? I mean, we could just go Leno. I think Spurs will rack up a lot of shots. Why not? So we probably start Flecken, start Reguilon, start Pedro Porro, start Doughty. Maybe Nico Williams, first defender on bench. Obviously, the attack will be before, so that will be first on bench. I would probably, in this situation, bench either Paquetá or Gibbs White. I'd probably play all three forwards. I think I'd go 3-4-3 here. That's probably like my free hit draft. If Bailey doesn't play in the conference game, he's surely... Yeah, that's a good point, actually. I mean, I'd probably change Bailey to Paquetá if Bailey gets... If Bailey, for example, like doesn't feature much. But I think Bailey will feature because that game versus Ajax, they're 0-0, right? So they kind of need a chase anyways. Nazim says, great content as always. Still have free hit and triple captain. I mean, Free at 29 makes sense. Yeah, triple captain 34 also makes sense. That's fine with me. Do we need Solanke for Gameweek 30-33? You can sell him for Muniz. I think that's fine. But obviously, keep in mind, of course, look, the reality is Solanke is still a good pick. So it's up to you. I think the reality, of course, is that Salah is a huge upgrade. So that's going to be a huge sort of differential for you. So if that's what you need to do, I think that's fine. And it's not like Solanke is going to have crazy good fixtures. Like even if he doubles on 34, which you'll find out in Game Week 30, you'll find out then, right? If he doesn't double in Game Week 34, less reason to keep Solanke in your team. Varnagan says, is wildcard 36 too late? I don't think so. But once again, it comes down to whether you have injuries, right? If you got injuries, a bunch of situations that you need to deal with, then fine, wildcard earlier. But if you don't need to wildcard early, 36 makes sense. Like it's going to create the sexiest bench boost possible. Why not? Madison or Gibbs White? I'd probably go Madison because I think I'd want to keep Madison in my team, medium term compared to Gibbs White, who I probably would only want to have game week 29. So yeah. Do you think we are underestimating Fulham at home? They don't ever concede more than 2, and Spurs really struggled without Van der Ven. I mean, I'm not sure what the point is. Like they did quite well with Dragusin coming in the Aston Villa game. Obviously, look, it was also at one point a 10 versus 11. As far as Spurs away, I think you just have to look at Spurs being a defense. Like, have they actually been a good defense this season? Not really, even away. So they were quite fortunate to probably concede less than 2. I'm looking at home and away expected goals conceded, and Fulham are still quite firmly within the bottom 10. I don't really care much about home and away. I'm not a home and away person. I think home is always better. Away is always worse. That's my judgment. But Fulham still comfortably, if you look at overall stats, a bottom 10 sort of defense. So from that perspective, and I think there's a pretty big gulf if you actually look at expected goals conceded, like between Tottenham and Fulham. There's like a huge drop off in terms of the expected goals conceded between teams like a Tottenham who have conceded like 44 XG-C, and then a team like Fulham that have conceded 47. Now Tottenham, I think, have played one less game, so that's a big change. Same with Chelsea as well, given that we expect Chelsea versus Tottenham to be played sometime soon. But yeah, I think we can still say Fulham are pretty comfortably a pretty poor defense, and I have no worries about going for a lot of Spurs attackers. Another thing too is if we look at that logic too, like there aren't that many great attacking teams on paper this week. The reality is just that all the fixtures are such that you probably assume that these are both teams to score type games, and you go for the best attackers possible. So I agree. Like, why not go for your Nottingham Forest players versus Luton, who've been a horrific team in general? But that shouldn't preclude you from going for Spurs players. Another thing too is we probably expect Spurs to score, but that's okay because some of the Spurs defenders that you're going to pick are attackers as well. Like none of the defenders that we've picked to defend, really. We picked just attackers because we're expecting people to concede. Is Salah good? Salah's the best captain for Game 30 for me. Madison has good record at Fulham. That's cool. Does anybody here know if you... No, guys, if you transfer before your free hit, it doesn't count. The free hit just cancels the transfer. Salah versus Haaland for the rest of the season. I'd prefer Salah, personally. Yeah. Bowen's son, Morris Watkins. Best differential captain for next week. I'd probably say Tony, if you believe it. McAllister as a double up with Salah. I mean, I don't like McAllister at all because if Salah's back, that means no penalties for McAllister. And unless you think McAllister just being at the 10 spot is going to change his value, I just don't believe it, personally. Wildcarding at 31, worth taking -8 for Tony, Madison, Bowen. I think those are good transfers, Raji. Those are good transfers, Raji. Come on, chat. Give this guy all some love. Love. Thanks for your efforts, Fran. I'm confident most people following you are better at FPL because of your dedication. Thank you, NPC Cooks. And I hope you're cooking this season as well. But yeah, I mean, obviously, if you guys are here, you're new to the stream and all, do feel free to check out some of my videos. We obviously make FPL content very consistently. The content that I'm most proud of course, is the cheat sheet series. It's quite an in-depth sort of guide of transfers every week, and you can follow it every week because it's basically a moving guide. And in a way, it sort of captures my sort of understanding of the FPL landscape for all picks, all positions, and all prices. But yeah, if you're here, subscribe, like the stream, comment as well. That really helps. Andrew says, bring in Salah next game week. I feel getting ahead of the game. Many will follow 31. I mean, look, I think game week 30, if you can get to Salah in game week 30, that's better than getting Salah in game week 31. But the reality is a lot of people will be uncomfortable with how bad their game week 30 team is on defense, for example. And it's very hard to sort of just, I guess, push towards Salah on that week when you have, for example, like someone like Watkins is pretty good at like being a sell, for example, in game week 31. So it's harder to, like, let's say if you're keeping Haaland, for example, and you want to go Haaland plus Salah, very, very hard to go off of Watkins on game week 30. He's just got a good fixture. It doesn't make sense to sell him. So on that basis, I think Salah on game week 31, for a lot of people who aren't wildcarding around that time, makes a lot more sense because it's a lot easier to get there even for a hit. It just feels more intuitive because you're trading a bad Watkins fixture for a good Salah fixture, a perfect one even. As far as Joseph's question, is Salah alone good enough Liverpool coverage? I think just about, right? I mean, let's see what the Liverpool fixtures are in 34 and 37, because that will change your mind. Obviously, Liverpool aren't going to double, but you'll also probably change your mind if it's a Fulham game or an Everton game. And I don't think it's enough coverage, but I don't think you also necessarily need to get Darwin. Like, for example, you might prefer, if you don't have free at 34, you might prefer going for Isaac over Darwin. And then in terms of defenders, you still might prefer a Chelsea defender. You still might prefer an Everton defender and things like that. Real cheat sheet behemoth this week, absolutely. Like, I think the cheat sheet this week was like, what, 43 minutes. So if you want a little bit of transfer guide for both the free hit and just regular transfers, that's what the cheat sheet is there for. Why not Kudus over Paqueta? He's outscored him last few weeks, and he's also had an assist disallowed. I mean, but we're not just looking at assist. I mean, first of all, I think Paqueta is on penalties, which I think is an intangible that's really nice. As far as Kudus outscoring Paqueta over the last few weeks, I'm not sure if that's even true. If you look at their underlying stats as well, I think it's pretty similar. But then also, if you think Paqueta's on pens, then I think Paqueta kind of trumps Kudus as a pick, because Kudus's expected goal involvement is like, I think 0.31 this season per 90, whereas Paqueta actually has something like 0.39. And I prefer, obviously, I love my underlying stats, and I think their minutes are very similar, and Paqueta's on penalties. So I tend to pick the player with better underlying stats per 90. Alex Whitney says, FPL newbie here, if you buy a player and their price increases and you sell them at a higher price, does that put... I mean, in theory, Alex, but actually the biggest thing that you need to understand is that when you own a player, you will only get 0.1 of real selling value after they've risen twice. And a good way of illustrating that is if you go to FPL and you go to the transfer page, then you go to list. There's actually something called a current price, a selling price, and a purchase price. Your purchase price is when you bought the player. Your selling price is what the player is worth if you were to sell it back to the market. And the current price is actually the market value of the player. So the selling price is what you can sell a player back in terms of the market. Current price, as I said, is market. What's a good example of that? So who's risen in price recently, right? Son, as you can see, my purchase price is 9.6. His selling price is 9.7, and his current price is 9.9. Now, the reason why Son's selling price is 9.7 and not 9.8 or not 9.9 is because, as I said, you need 2 price rises to get an additional selling price, right? So because Son has actually only risen 3 times from whence I bought him, 0.3 price rises, I can only get 0.1 because unfortunately to get 2 price rises out of Son, I need him to rise 4 times. So every 2 price rises, you'll basically get 1 in terms of selling value. So if he rose, for example, to 10 million, which he very well could this game week, I would be able to sell Son at 9.8. Now, if he fell, for example, if Son fell in price to 9.8, I would not be affected. His selling price would be 9.7. So I think the easiest way to understand what's going on with your team and your players is to look at, the transfer list page, and that's pretty much it. Hope that helps. Baldwin says, I'm chasing someone in my mini league. They're first and you're third with a 14-point difference. You're playing free at this week, assuming they are too. I don't think you need to risk it, mate. 14 points is something that you can absolutely overcome over the next 10 game weeks. If you think Son's the best captain, I would still captain Son. Why is free at 34, wild card 35, bench boost 37 not a good strategy? Because I think the thing is, the whole point of wildcarding, in my opinion, is to dead end a team, right? You dead end a team into a wild card. Therefore, you maximize the value of going for the wild card because you've put yourself in a position where you are getting the most value out of your wild card. For example, what I did when I wildcard on 26. Now, the wildcard on 26 didn't work out, right? But the dead ending that I did actually did work out heading towards wildcard 26 because what I did is I dead ended with double game week players from Liverpool and City and therefore got a huge rank rise out of it. The same logic I think you can hold by going for double game week players. Let's say from game week 30 onwards, you build your team week after week towards game week 34, where you know there's a double. That way you maximize the double game week 34. And let's say in the short term, if your team sucks now for free at 20 or for game week 29, free at 29, and that will allow you to sort of continue to make transfers towards game week 34 in the future. Because let's say if you went knees deep, for example, for all these game week 29 players, but also you planned a free at 34, I think you're sort of just losing a lot of hits and value there. I'd rather, for example, a free at 29, wildcard 35, or if you're going to free on 34, you might as well wildcard on 30 or 31 because the way I see it is you can wildcard on 30, 31, build a Haaland Salah draft that's actually really nice and have it geared towards bench boost 37, and then your free hit on 34 would just basically target a completely different set of players, which I think is also viable as a strategy. And this way, I suppose you'd also be you'd feel a little bit better about dead ending into these gaming 29 players because that's the reality of the transfers this week. Unless you're going for Spurs players this week, any transfers towards West Ham players, Brentford players, or even Nottingham Forest players are in a sense a little bit of a dead end because you're placing a lot of importance on gaming 29 and you're sort of neglecting the fact that they're not exactly great holds going forwards. Like, for example, after this week, is Reguilon a good player in gaming 29 onwards? Not really. Is Tony? Not really, but they have such a good fixture versus Burnley that it makes the transfer worthwhile. But going forwards, the only players I think that are actually worth hits this week that will last you at least in the short term, gaming 30 and beyond, are your Spurs players. So that's something to think about. Streaming is XP waste. Yeah, but we love XP waste, though. That's true, actually. Should be playing RuneScape right now. Flame says, good evening, Fran. Thanks for the stream. Opinions. I think David Dacho Fofana is a huge punt, and I really like him. His minutes seem really good. His underlying stats are really good as well. What the fuck is this? What a W. Mate, Chai, well done on your wild card, by the way. It's a pretty sick wild card. Can't lie. Now, imagine if you played Palmer over Tony for that gut feeling. No, I'm just kidding. Sammy says, Fran fielding 9, worth it for a -4. I think that's worth it. Look, if you're, as I said, for me, it's not even just about the amount of players you have this week. It's like if I look at my team now and I showed you my team, yes, I've got 5 players who play next week, but the reality is you always have more value by owning attackers in this game, naturally. So the more defenders you have, the less value those defenders are, and the more attackers you have, the more valuable your 5 or 6 players are. If you've already got 8 or 7 right now, I think you don't really need to free hit hoping or assuming that you actually have a lot of attackers. So let's say you've got Son, Madison, Watkins, and Tony. Like if you've got those 4 players now already, you're done. Or let's say it's Son, Madison, and Bowen and Watkins. I think you're also done. Whereas I only have 2 attackers, and I'm definitely in a free hit camp. Fran is Chai's father. What? 352 for free hit worth it. I mean, totally fine. I think if you think Bailey's got really good minutes, that works well. How do you explain the current sale price for players like Saka and Haaland? What do you mean? So the sale price is just, if you go in transfers and list view, if you go in transfers here and then you go in list. So for example, my sale price for Saka is 8.8, even though his current price is 9.2. So obviously I lose technically 0.4 of value gained within Saka by transferring him out. The same way, for example, because I bought Haaland at 14.0, if he drops again, this selling price will also drop. So if I was to go back to the Saka example, if he drops one more time, actually nothing happens to me because I've already pocketed 6 price rises from him and he's on his 7th. So if he drops, he would only be going back to 6 price rises and I would already have 0.3 gained on that. So from my perspective, it's different. From your perspective, it's going to be based on when you bought Saka or when you bought Haaland. So it comes down to that. And that's going to impact your selling price and your purchase price and your current price, obviously. Let's see. Going back to chat questions. Fran, would you go Gibbs White, Elanga, Luis? I prefer Gibbs White. As far as Luis or Bailey, I would just watch the European fixture and make a decision. I prefer Luis. Like if I knew, for example, Bailey and Luis both played versus Ajax, would I be more confident that Bailey's gonna have crazy minutes? Not really. So I'd say Douglas Luiz right now. But obviously, if let's say Bailey is somehow rested in that Ajax fixture, and they don't do so well, I don't know. You're probably looking at a lot of minutes for Bailey. But is that at all very likely? I'm not so sure. I think Bailey plays versus Ajax, and that's a slight concern. But he's also, I think, if you recently see the substitutions too, it's not like he's a like for like sub right now within the sort of setup of Aston Villa for Diaby. So I wouldn't be overall worried about Bailey having really bad minutes. I still expect him to start, but the question, of course, is whether you're seeing Bailey get subbed off at 70 or 80. Yeah, if Watkins had penalties, like honestly, I don't care what fixtures he has. He's staying in my team forever, but he doesn't. So I have 4 of main attackers, worth a hit for Madison. I still think it's worth a hit because Gaming 30, as I said, is very useful. You lose your 2 free transfers if you're free hit. No, you're right. You're right. You're absolutely right, Joe. But that's also something I would say. I mean, let's say, okay, this season's already happened, but if you think about it in the future, you'd want to rethink about that too. Like if you were planning to free at, I think if you're planning to free at 29 all this time and you rolled the transfer this week, then there's probably something wrong with the decision making there. But obviously, if you're, let's say, just planning to not free hit, then that's fine. Just don't free it. Just don't free hit. You got a very similar team to mine and don't want to free at 29. What moves would you look for? I think I would just go Madison and Porro for a hit. Anything other than that, I'm not quite sure, to be honest. Would you say Havertz is a good punt in the next few game weeks? I mean, yes, but obviously when you say next few game weeks, you mean starting from game week 31. The way Martinez just bottled that penalty, you don't want him anywhere near that Arsenal. Fair enough. I think I would just go for Madison and Porro as hits. And would I take any other hits? I probably would have to take Tony as a hit from Solanke. Ugh, it's pretty ugly. But or maybe I would actually go Haaland to Tony if I was really doing this. But I'm not considering free hit 34 right now for my team. Yeah, maybe Haaland out. Maybe Haaland out because at least if I go Haaland out, I would just be able to go to Salah in game week 30, which I think is quite valuable. Maybe I don't. Maybe I just go Fernandes out. Maybe I just go Madison, Porro. I don't know, Gibbs White. Nah, I don't think it makes sense. I'd probably still go Porro. I'd still probably go Madison. Those two things are locked, right? If you really don't want a free hit in my position. And then I think it's, questions of whether you want to go like Fernandes to Gibbs White, for example, which should hopefully free up a lot of cash for me. Or, Solanke to Tony as well, which obviously maximizes this game week a little bit more, I would say, but might make it a lot harder to go Salah anyways. So those are kind of things that you want to consider if you're in the same position as me, team-wise. Let's see. Let's go back to chat questions. Atleti. Oh, mate, I need to check the Champions League results. Wait, did I miss something? Okay, let me have a look. Oh my god, did they win? Yeah, I totally missed that. I need to rewatch that game later. FPL content takes priority. I didn't even know Depay actually scored 86th minutes. I mean, I'm a Real Madrid fan, so like, do I really care? Not really. Of course, I will miss the pen. Thanks a lot, Fran. Thanks a lot, Anton, for joining. Sammy says Bowen to Salah locked in for gaming 30. I think that's a perfect move, Sammy. Makes sense. You reckon Watkins starts taking penalties as he's in the Golden Boot race? Yeah, but then I think, like, is Emery going to give him penalties? I don't know about that. I did see that Douglas Luiz once said on stream that he doesn't mind giving Watkins penalties. Now, let's see if the manager cares. Your team doesn't suck for 29 is actually very good this week. Yeah, I was just theoretically saying it. I'm not saying your team actually sucks. I mean, if your team's perfect for gaming 29, I mean, what I would probably say, Joseph, is why not just wildcard right after this? Because I'm struggling to think, let's say you go for, let's say you've gone, deep for the Luton players. You don't have Salah, for example. would it not make sense to just wildcard if you for example treat, let's say, Gameweek 29 as some sort of dead end for your team? Like, why not just wildcard off of that? And then you could actually, I would say, you'd benefit from being able to dispose like a Bowen and a Gibbs White and even, for example, some Luton players immediately, and then plan for free at 34. And then your shorter term wild card, even though it's not going to give you the same dividends in terms of how good a wild card is right before a bench boost, should still give you some really good short term games that I think is really nice. Particularly if you're getting to target, for example, just a generally good run of fixtures for Liverpool and other teams like that. So I kind of like that. If you're getting Fofana and free hit, should you get any Brentford defenders? I mean, if you think the Brentford defenders that you're going for are going to attack, like Reguilon, I think that's fine, right? Because part of the value of going for Reguilon is actually just the attack. The clean sheet odds this week is literally less than 30% for all teams. So one thing that I would say is, if you think about it that way, it actually makes a lot of sense to go for some of the attackers. Like, look at Doughty this week. No clean sheets, lots of goals conceded, still gets 5 points because he's an attacker. Reguilon is still extremely attacking, so I like him a lot. The same thing, like, honestly, Spurs could very well concede, and we're not going for Pedro Porro exclusively because we think he's a clean sheet merchant. No, we're actually going for Pedro Porro because he's an attacker. So I don't really mind if Muniz scores. I don't think it's not pure hedging, right? Because you're going for attacking fullbacks, and these attacking fullbacks have really good underlying stats, like Doughty, Porro, and Reguilon, or even Rorslev. You're on free at 29. Ivan says, what are some more risky picks? Risky picks, I think Paquetá is a risky pick. Gibbs White, Chris Wood is a risky pick. Muniz is a risky pick. David Dacho Fofana is a risky pick. Wisa as well. Defenders, I think Rorslev. Nico Williams is a risky pick. Sells, the goalkeeper from Nottingham Forest, is a risky pick. In the midfield, I mean, who else do we have? I mean, Kudus, of course, is going to be a risky pick, but I think his ownership is actually a little bit high. Who else do we have? Brennan Johnson, if we get some sort of leak that he starts, which I think is unlikely, but we very well could. That's a good pick. If, let's say, Van de Ven is out, Dragusin won't have any ownership at all. That's a very risky pick, but it could go well. The guy's a man mountain. Yeah, these are your risky picks. Udogi, even if you don't want to go, Dragusin deep, you can go Udogi. The ownership is on Porro right now, so Udogi will be a risky pick. I might think about Watkins to Nunez for Gaming 31. Absolutely, my friend. Yep. Three Spanish teams go through. Yeah, that's huge. I mean, look, Real Madrid, we played awful, so that really sucked. I'll definitely be rewatching that Leti game. And what happened in the end to the Dortmund game? Let me have a look now. I have not been following my Champions League football. All right, Dortmund advanced as well. Marco Reus, UCL fantasy points. Let's go. Huge. Free at 29. What are some more risky? Sorry, I literally answered that question like 2 minutes ago. Joe Wood said he's doing Haaland, Foden, Maguire for Porro, Matters, Tony. I think that's fine, mate. That's a very good -8. And hope, like, I think the only question I'd say is, like, does that get you Salah next week as well? Would you say not bringing in Haaland for 31 is risky, seeing Villa's defense recently? I mean, look, a lot of people are going to own Haaland, so it's risky. But then the thing is, I think if you think about it, where if the opportunity cost is going for a Salah captaincy, then I wouldn't care about the risk because it's a Salah captaincy versus Sheffield. So I'll take that. If you're feeling one of the premiums will go down, e.g. won't finish. Look, if one of the premiums goes down, what is the point of a wild card? Completely worthless. We don't even need a wild card right now. Yeah, choosing Kirkes instead of Zabarny, spectacular backfire. I mean, I'm not going to hindsight merchant, but if you look at the cheat sheet for a reason, like, we have Zabarny, not Kirkes, because Kirkes is a risk. And when you go for players like that, unless you're absolutely certain you're going to maximize the most out of the double game week, and it could work out, right? Semenyo worked. Tavernier, Kluivert didn't work. Somehow Ryan Christie worked. Like, I'm not going to hindsight merchant, but I think you can see that, of course, Kirkes has riskier minutes. And another thing too about Bournemouth this season is we've seen a lot of rotation in the midweek fixtures. So if you've seen, Iraola sort of rotate, the only player who really stays within the team ever is Zabarnyi, is Solanke. And I mean, he's already put some pretty dangerous comments about Neto in his presser as well. So I'm not saying it's a learning point, but it's something to think about. Like, do you value minutes or do you value the theoretical upside? Because another thing too with Kirkes is his underlying stats were pretty poor this season with Bournemouth. Even though, of course, before he had joined Bournemouth, he was one of the most interesting sort of fullback talents in Europe and had really good goals and assists. So that's something to think about. Took a -8 for Kluivert and Bowen this week. Yeah, look, that's FPL. Look, I mean, it was a great Bowen fixture, so I don't even blame you. Even Kluivert seemed like his minutes were going to be okay. Could I tell you that Semenyo was the only player who's going to start 2 games? No, I wouldn't have guessed that. So yeah, sorry. Ja says, is it worth taking a -4 for defender for 10 players? It depends which defender that is. If it's a Spurs defender, I think it's worthwhile, that -4 for sure. Took a -8 for Kluivert and Bowen this week. Was a disaster. It could have been. Oh, sorry, I've literally just read that. Zabarnyi was a 1 point on both games. He didn't score. Just goal luck. Yes, but the thing is, he got to score a goal because he was on the field, right? So you're comparing that to Kirkes, who played 45 minutes of football. Would you prefer the player who plays 180 and actually has chances to score off set pieces, or someone who plays 45 minutes? Which is best in Gameweek 30, Bowen to Salah? Like, for example, I didn't go Zabarnyi for a -4. I did say it was possible. Did I actually think it made sense? Not really, because I thought Saliba had a great fixture, and Aaron Ramsdale absolutely ruined it for me. But that's that. Sorry, going back to the question. Gameweek 30, Bowen to Salah makes the most sense. Yeah, I think so. Out of all the goalkeepers who are playing this week, I think Flecken's the best pick. Sells is probably my second best pick. But that's literally going by order of clean sheet odds. Right? Gameweek 29 plans, free hit. Yeah, that's literally what it is. We're just going to wait till the deadline, though, to sort of pull the trigger on it, just in case any sort of royal family shocks happen. But that's it. Are double game weeks for weaker teams something we should target going forward? I mean, when you say weaker teams, do you mean Crystal Palace? Do you mean Newcastle, who recently looked quite weak? What do you mean by weaker teams, per se? I think, like, with Bournemouth this week, it's like the fixtures were amazing. With Luton, you could also argue that their fixtures are pretty good. And then also they also play on Gameweek 29, so that was a lot of the value behind Luton. So it comes down to what you're saying, I think. Mids, Son, Foden, Palmer, Bowen, Barkley. Son, Foden, Palmer, Bowen, Barkley. Yep, that's a great midfield. The Son, Bowen, Barkley is great for next week. Morris, Watkins is also lovely, yeah. It's a good team for Gameweek 29. I mean, like, you're basically set once you go for those Spurs players. Like, if you want to go for more, Joseph, and I think you're all good to go. As in Madison, right? Because you've already got good defense like Doughty and Porro. You're pretty set. You're on late. Yeah, we are on late. But obviously the game week finished late as well, so that's why we're on late. Not too late, to be fair. I mean, sometimes some games of football finish. I mean, some games of football start at 8, so then you see later live streams, I suppose. This royal family shock news has got me nervous. All right. My teams. Honestly, I'd probably just go Madison, Joseph, and just call it a day. Maybe you can wildcard in Gaming 31. I think that's not too bad. Turns out Semenyo and Unal. Yeah, but I mean, like, for me, Nigel, I think Semenyo was a good pick before that. As far as Enes Unal, like, did I see the value of the pick? Like, not really at all. I think Semenyo made a bit more sense because it's like he can start, right? Because he's a right winger. He's actually reversed out of position. But Unal, you kind of know that he's the type of player who's only going to come on if Bournemouth need to chase. Like, let's say they're winning. Like, does he come on and does he do the things that he did? Probably not. And would you always take your punts with players who play more minutes? I would say so. Because yes, of course, there's going to be always players in FPL who, like, there's a player who comes off the bench scores a goal and assists. And Django Ouattara in the first game is a good example of that. So you could argue that he's the MVP of the week, but like, was it at all reasonable, I think, with logic to pick someone like him or Unal? No. Semenyo, I would say, sure. I agree with that. Have I got insider knowledge? I've got no insider knowledge, mate. I mean, I'm sitting here saying my Gameweek 29 plans are a free hit. And unfortunately, there's nothing to chase in terms of free hit points, so I'll just wait to free hit on the deadline. You rate Semenyo, especially after AFCON, but Irilla's like Pep in his rotation. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing too. Like, in 2 weeks, Semenyo might not be a starter for Bournemouth, and that's life. But I think it's obviously a little bit more, less likely because they've got less depth in theory on the right wing position compared to the left wing position. But Kluivert could play right wing too. So, any reason I haven't locked in for it? No particular reason. I just think that there's no need to lock it in. Like, there's no players to, there's no price rises to catch. It's a free hit, and it's a sub 100 million free hit. Would you do Saliba to Udogie to field 11? Yeah, I would do that. That's a great transfer. Would you do Trippier to Reguilon long term as a free transfer? I mean, I don't really know what the Trippier is in terms of his timeline, right? Because I saw him sitting on the bench. If Trippier's close to coming back, and you can get him as soon as Game Week 30, then I think we expect Trippier back in Game Week 30, right? Because we got the international break. So I think if that's the case, then keep Trippier. But if, of course, Trippier is longer, like injured for more than Game Week 30, then he's not worth keeping. But I'm pretty sure he's coming back soon, so I would keep Trippier. Is -8 for Holland to Nunez, Tavernier to Foden, Gordon to Sunworth in Game Week 30? I mean, if Gordon's out, sure. I'd probably say it just about is worth it. Long term, as Jorginho holds his place in the Arsenal team, Rice is interesting. I won't lie. Like, I think Rice is interesting in the from the sort of position where if you really need like a budget enabler, and let's say you already have Palmer, we don't want Douglas Luiz, after Game Week 30, but for Rice, we very well could. So if somehow you're gonna get some value from Rice as a cheap pick, he might just be an interesting pick because he's also on some set pieces. Why is Game Week 31 wildcard so popular? You're thinking Game Week 30. I think Game Week 31 wildcard is popular because people are thinking, if you own Watkins in your team, his last great fixture is Game Week 30. If you own any Aston Villa players, that's the logic. For Liverpool, arguably the swing is on Game Week 30. 31, right? 30, of course, is a better fixture if you were to compare to City's fixture. But I think, yeah, it comes down to, let's say if you're over-invested in City, over-invested in Arsenal, I think Game Week 30 might intuitively sound better because you're going for more Liverpool players. Newcastle already start their good fixtures. It makes sense even if you get to bin off Watkins. I think that's fine. It just comes down to the shape of your team. Like, let's say you've got maybe less Arsenal players that you don't need to play in the first place. You actually really, really want Haaland and Salah on a perfect structure. I think Game Week 31 intuitively makes more sense because it's a better Haaland fixture and it's also a better Salah fixture. So if you want to make that structural shift, it also potentially makes sense more on Game Week 31. It just comes down to what the priorities are and how different your team is. I think 30-31 is basically the same looking wild card. It just comes down, as I said, whether you want to keep Watkins for that extra week and see it through, really. 76 points is incredible, mate. Lucas, you know that. It's more than me. Why free hit and not save? I just don't think Game Week 34 is going to be as big a game week as we previously expected, like let's say 3-4 game weeks ago. So my transfers since then have reflected that I want to go free at 29. Is Petrovic a starter? I think he is a starter for Chelsea. I think Sanchez is a horrific keeper, so I'm struggling to believe he'll keep his place in the team. Havertz, I think, is also a very reasonable pick. That's why he's also appeared on my cheat sheet. Decided to captain Neto. Don't have Son or Palmer. Oh, it's tough, Immortal. Sorry about that. Is Petrovic... Sorry, answer that question. If no free hit, should you do early transfers to avoid rise? You mean avoid falls? Yeah, I think obviously if you're not free hitting, you can start transferring players if you want to, but obviously know that there's always going to be a small risk. I hope that helps. I think we're pretty close to wrapping up the stream though now. Really appreciate you guys being around. If you guys have any other last questions, I'm happy to go through them now. And then now the questions come. Alrighty, let's get to these questions. Is Sun Captain a shout in Gaming 30? Absolutely is your shout. Yeah. I mean, let's be honest. Like, if you don't own Salah in Gaming 30, you're probably you're 100% Sun Captaining over Haaland. Gibbs White or Kudus. You've got Bowen, Son, and Madison. I'd go Gibbs White. Why not target Luton? You don't like the idea of shifting Watkins just because of fixtures. Villa's still a good team. Yeah, but the thing is, okay, I think fixtures always give you value. I think if you're wildcarding on 30-31, like, you probably want to offload both of them because you want to maximize the doubles in 34-37. It's not like the Bournemouth doubles are amazing. So, yeah. You got Iwobi in your free hit, but you don't like that pick. Would you suggest to have Bowen, Son, Madison, 3-4-3? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you don't need to go Iwobi deep. Iwobi's actually a really good differential, but do you need to go Iwobi deep? I don't think so. Yeah, I mean, definitely agree with that sort of logic. Excuse me, sorry. Would you do Turner to Flecken? I think the question, or the answer rather, is Flecken worth 4 points this game week? And honestly, I do not think so. But if it's a free transfer for you, fair enough, go for it. I just don't think it's... I think the power for you, Joseph, is you got 2 free transfers, right? So you could technically roll, or am I wrong? So I think I'd rather roll than go for Flecken. Let's just put it that way. Foden to Madison for -4 to get to a full... I think that's fine. I think that's fine because it's not like Foden's fixture on Gaming 30 is amazing. Wildcard 28, bring in Tony for Solanke or Madison for Saka, roll. I think Tony for Solanke intuitively feels better because you probably don't lose as much value and you probably want to keep Saka for the rest of the season compared to Solanke, so why not? Captain Tony over Son, I think that's a good differential. Burnley are leaky for sure, but at the same time, I think Fulham are not some sort of iron wall. Are you right in saying it's either Game Week 34? No, you're wrong. There's going to be a lot of doubles in Game Week 37 no matter what. In fact, we actually just think that there's going to be a few doubles in Game Week 34. Yeah, that's it. There's a lot of fixtures to be replayed. I can tell you all of them. So, I mean, right now, we're actually kind of expecting... You know what? Let me just do this now. We're expecting something like this. So we're expecting on 34 something like this. Brighton City, Chelsea, Tottenham, Wolves, Arsenal, Fulham, Liverpool, Man United, Sheffield United, Crystal Palace, Newcastle, and then Gaming 35 or 36, Brighton and Chelsea to be rescheduled. And then on Gaming 37, we're expecting Tottenham City, Arsenal, Chelsea, Wolves, Bournemouth, Everton, Liverpool. That's one potential possibility. A lot of these would be doubles, right? Except for the teams that are already involved within Champions League competitions. Or it's like something like Tottenham City on 34, Arsenal, Chelsea, Wolves, Bournemouth, Everton, Liverpool, United, Sheffield, Crystal Palace, Newcastle, and then 35, 36, once again, Chelsea, Brighton. On 37, Brighton, Chelsea, Chelsea, Tottenham, Wolves, Arsenal, Fulham, Liverpool. Now, what you'll notice actually is that they're basically 2 fixtures, right, for Liverpool, 2 fixtures for City, 2 Tottenham fixtures, 2 Chelsea fixtures, and the doubles that we expect are Crystal Palace and Newcastle doubles on 34. So that's something to just flag to you. Basically, we expect also United and Sheffield doubles as well. So those are the 4 teams where we expect doubles for 34. For 37, you're expecting more doubles from Liverpool and City because, of course, they're advanced in the FA Cup. They're also advanced in European competitions. So very likely that their doubles will appear on 37. In fact, it's 100% confirmed. It just depends on what specific fixture it is. As I said, it's either Tottenham City on 37 or Brighton versus City on 37. So you're just seeing that some of the fixtures in terms of the singles are being swapped around, but the actual double will happen no matter what. Because if you look at the fixture slate on 34 and 37, you'll find that 37 already has some City fixtures in place. And the rescheduled fixtures are just what will create doubles. We will have doubles on 34, but there's a 6% chance that I've heard that we won't have doubles in 34. I'm just saying that 94% chance that you're going to have doubles is the case. 37 is always going to have doubles. It's going to have a ton of doubles. FPL page is up. Yeah, we can refresh. Holland out for now, then back in Gameweek 32. Makes sense. You're hitting the hay. Take care, Nigel. All the best. We're not seeing the fixtures. Yeah, I mean, the fixtures aren't going to be on the FPL website. It's you kind of need to follow people like Ben Krellin, Talha Nadim, or Planet FPL James. Thank you, Trini. You're killing it too, and well done. Wildcard 28. It's already cooked more than Wildcard 26. Well done. Make a bold prediction for Gameweek 29. I don't know. Chris Wood is going to score the most amount of points, and I'm going to own him. No, I'm just kidding. But I probably will actually own him. That's a serious take. All right. I think that's it for me. Let's just refresh the old page, see our new rank. Even though I've kind of cropped it from you guys. That's not refreshed. Oh, the overall rank hasn't refreshed, but the points have refreshed. So yeah, 75 points. Cool. Well, that was this game week. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you guys take care. And goodbye. Can you recommend people for pre-game leaks that are reliable? I mean, FPL Tony, I think, is reliable. I don't know a specific, all-out leaks account. I mean, I think FPL Brandon does some leaks, but I don't think he always shares them on Twitter necessarily. So I don't really know a leaks account per se. Thank you, Chai. Thank you, everyone in general. Solanke Muniz, I don't even know what that question relates to. Solanke doesn't play in Gameweek 29. But yeah, take care, guys. Hope you guys have a lovely week ahead, and I'll see you guys on the deadline.